There are plenty of videos about Australia, and most of them are usually about their animals because they're so unique, and a lot of them are very dangerous and want to kill you. A lot of these animals were brought here by the British from different parts of the world like Africa and India. You have animals from goats, camel, and worst of all, rabbits. They brought these animals, and not only did they not help, but they ruined the ecosystem of that country. But let's continue. Let's talk about a pest that has been in Australia ever since we've known it. You can find this roach in sugarcane farms, and it's called the cane beetle. These cane beetles do not help sugarcane plants whatsoever. They literally destroy the roots of the plant and ruin the entire farm. They used all types of pesticides and it didn't work. They tried to make a poison, but nothing was good. The Department of Agriculture was always trying to figure out a way on how to get rid of these cane beetles because their sugarcane farms were being destroyed every year. Some of these experts figured out the way. They say you can't get rid of these pests with poison or anything. You have to bring their enemy to their backyard. Who was their enemy? This creature, the cane toad, where you can find them only in Latin America and nowhere else. It was a great idea at first, and the Australians were in such a hurry that they didn't even try to experiment or research on what it would do to their ecosystem. At the same time, the American government was trying to take these toads into the nature of Hawaii, and it was doing a whole lot of experiments before it actually introduced it. When the Americans were working on these toads, they had a whole lot of them in the laboratory. So the Australians very quickly asked the Americans if they can buy some of these toads off of them. The US government sells Australia 100 of these toads, and they finally enter the country. And the first thing they did was not experiment on it, but they put them everywhere in the farms they wanted. You could say when these toads entered the ecosystem of Australia, they felt at home and they wanted to have as many as babies as possible. So 100 of these toads turned into 1,000 very quickly, then 10,000. Then all of a sudden you have over 100 million cane toads in your country. You could say when the Department of Agriculture of Australia saw what they have done to their own ecosystem, they were not happy about it because it's one of the worst things you could do to your own country. They realized that they had ruined the entire area by just bringing 100 of these frogs here. This toad is just a giant frog. It's venomous, and getting rid of it is damn near impossible. Anything you get rid of, it's gonna get replaced anyway. The biggest ones can be as long as 40 centimeters and weigh as much as 3 kilos. It's like a tiny monster. The good thing about this toad is that it eats anything, so it cleans the environment. Most importantly, it eats insects, dead animals, rotten animals, and basically cleans the entire area. But when their population grows this much, they do more harm than good. I'm not sure what the Australian scientists and experts were thinking. The reason they brought this toad is to get rid of the cane beetle, the main reason they're losing cane sugars. But it's unfortunate because most of the time, the cane beetle lives underground, so it doesn't really come out unless it wants to do something. And underground, it's somewhere where this toad doesn't have access to, so it's considered a useless animal for hunting these beetles. Throughout history, this is where this toad used to live, in Latin America. But the red sections, especially Australia, is the places it was introduced by humans. When the Australians introduced him to Australia, the toads loved them so much that they grew exponentially, where their population is much larger than the place they originated from. You have no hope for this toad to help with the sugarcane, but that's not the only problem this toad carries. The main problem is the cane toad is ruining the ecosystem of Australia. You have a lot of different animals and plants that were brought here from different places and introduced to a whole new area, and they didn't cause any problems. Like for example, honeybees were never in North and South America. It was the Europeans that brought them in the 1600s. It doesn't cause any issues either. It was around the same time where the Europeans brought potatoes from South America all the way to Europe for the very first time. And now you have potatoes everywhere in the world, and it's not a problem. Another problem in third world countries especially are cats. Cats are very loving animals and they're not a problem, but when you let their population grow exponentially without controlling it, they're gonna be a huge problem. You could say the cat is the best hunter, but it's also a domesticated animal. So if it wants to hunt something especially smaller than itself, it has no problems. It kills all types of pests like mice. Also, worst of all, it kills all types of birds. In most countries of the world, they fix the cat so they don't reproduce and create a lot of kittens to ruin an environment. And that means the population is controlled and it doesn't cause an infestation. But let's get back to the cane toad. When you introduce a new creature to an environment, it could adapt very well and not hurt the ecosystem, like the honeybee. But the cane toad has entered an environment where it doesn't have any enemies. When you have a creature that doesn't have an enemy and it could reproduce very easily like this, it could take over the entire area. And when this happens, this is what you call an infestation. Let's get to know the toad itself. On the shoulders of this frog, you can find two sacs that's filled with venom. When the cane toad sees a threat or it feels threatened, it lets out a white pus out of the shoulders, and any animal that touches it, licks it, or gets close to it, it could be infected with it. When the poison enters certain animals' bodies, it starts attacking its cells and destroying it. And while it's doing that, it's slowly making its way to the heart. And then eventually, after a few minutes, it reaches the heart. And when it reaches the heart, that's when the story is gonna be over, because it will damage the heart and cause a failure. Like in Latin America, where this toad lives naturally, it has plenty of enemies. The biggest enemy it has is this crocodile-looking thing, but its real name is the broad-snouted caiman. The venom that comes out of this toad has no effect on this caiman, because this animal evolved with this toad living around it, so it doesn't affect it whatsoever. Unlike Australian animals that didn't live with this toad for millions of years, they just got to know him 90 years ago, so obviously they're gonna die. Australian experts all of a sudden realize that 77% of their freshwater crocodiles have been killed off, and it's all because of the cane toad. That's insane for a tiny toad to kill an animal like this, especially 77% of them. Either way, the experts can't get too bummed out, because the evolution is gonna go on either way. Just wait a couple million years, and finally, these animals could adapt and not get killed by this. But obviously that's a joke, because evolution takes a very long time. The toad is not the problem only. Another problem is the eggs it drops off. These eggs that are dropped off pretty much everywhere it goes have the same venom it has in its shoulder. So any creature that sees these eggs and gets hungry and wants to eat them, they're gonna eat a whole lot of poison and get killed the same way they do if they touch this toad. This is another reason that the population of the cane toad has grown exponentially. It drops off the eggs and basically eliminates anything that lives within this vicinity. And that means there's nothing that could kill these eggs, so most of them are born into the world. And that means many more frogs are added to their population. While in South America, there's a bunch of animals that have adapted to eating these eggs, so a very tiny amount of them are actually born into the real world. Another huge problem with this cane toad is that it conquers and it moves forward. It doesn't just stand still. They introduced it to the east coast of Australia, and look at this map and how much it has moved forward towards west. The most insane part is that this toad moves 50 kilometers a year towards the west of Australia, and that is insane. And you can't find any other animal that conquers this much land each year. Their population has been so large that they don't even show mercy to their own kind. Unlike other frogs or toads that never eat their own kind, The cane toad has started eating its own kind only in Australia. Obviously, it has been a very long time since the Australian people have been living with this toad, and most of them hate it, and whenever they see it, they want to kill it. Of course, the venom has no effect on the human body. It doesn't kill it, it just irritates your skin if you touch it. The people of Australia have been killing these toads since the 1970s, but if you kill a whole lot of them, it doesn't make a difference, because plenty of more are being born. The only hope the experts have is the scientists. Scientists to figure out how to get rid of these bastards. They're trying to genetically modify these toads, where anything that's born, it becomes a male, so slowly it cannot reproduce. Of course, the people are not a fan, because every time these scientists or experts have touched the ecosystem, they have ruined it even more. Either way, they have made plenty of mistakes, and they don't want to make the same mistakes 3 times. That is why they are moving forward very carefully.